The Holy Gospel according to St. Luke, the 17th chapter. Glory to you, Lord. On the way to Jerusalem, Jesus was going through the region between Samaria and Galilee. As he entered a village, 10 lepers approached him. Keeping their distance, they called out, saying, "Jesus, Master, have mercy on us." When he saw them, he said to them, "Go and show yourselves to the priests." And as they went, they were made clean. Then one of them, when he saw that he was healed, turned back, praising God with a loud voice. He prostrated himself at Jesus' feet and thanked him, and he was a Samaritan. Then Jesus asked, "Were not 10 made clean? But the other 9, where are they? Was none of them found to return and give praise to God except this foreigner?" Then he said to him, "Get up and go on your way. Your faith has made you well." The Gospel of the Lord. So early in my ministry, I was part of a Lutheran Roman Catholic clergy dialogue. It was a group of Lutheran pastors and Roman Catholic priests that got together maybe once every couple of months. And we talked about some of the discussions that have been going on between the Lutheran Church and the Catholic Church, and some other issues that affected both of our denominations. And even though it was more or less sponsored by the Metro DC Synod and the Archdiocese of Washington, we kept no minutes. There were no audio recordings of anything. We reported to no bishops, so we could say anything we wanted, and we got to know each other pretty well, and we had a good time together, and sometimes got together for social events as well. A lot of the people on that group really were a bunch of characters when you got to know everybody. And one day, we got a letter, because this was so long ago, it was in the days before email. We got a letter that Aldo, one of the Roman Catholic priests, had a massive heart attack. He was in the ICU, and they weren't certain that he was going to live. So just to let us know this and ask us to keep him in our prayers, which we did. And then a couple weeks later, we had our next meeting, and we were there before the meeting, and we were asking how Aldo was doing, because we were really concerned about him. And as we're discussing this, one of the group comes in and says, "Aldo's coming down the hall." And I still remember this. Aldo comes in, hiking up his pants because he'd lost so much weight. And we were all really glad to see him because he was alive and walking around and everything was good. And he sat down and he started to tell us the story of what had happened. And he said he had this heart attack that had so damaged his heart that some ridiculously small portion of his heart was still working. And I didn't even realize you could walk around and have that small portion of your heart working. And he said, so the doctors had told me that I cannot exert myself at all. I can't, probably walking down the hallway was probably taking a risk to do that. But he was one of our main characters. So he concluded that by saying, but at least the good part is the Cardinal's finally going to let me retire. So we said, well, that's good. But I said, we said, Aldo, what are you going to do now? What do you do, after you're retired and, to take care of yourself and everything? What are you going to do? And he says, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to go to Hawaii, visit my sister, and sit on the beach. And one of the Lutheran pastors in the group kind of looked in horror and said to him, Aldo, you could die if you go on that trip. And without missing a beat, Aldo says, the Lord can call me from the beach just as easy as the Lord can call me from any place else. And 2 decades later, I remember that story because I thought, what a great attitude. Even if you're sick, get up and go on your journey. Take the time to do what you got to do in the time that God gives it. And it's so not like the way I usually approach taking a journey. When I want to take a journey, and a lot of you know that I love traveling and going places, but I want to be well, and I want to be strong, and I want to know what's going to happen, and how it's all going to work out, and whether there's a chance that I'm going to die, or any of those things. I need to know that stuff. But Aldo didn't. He didn't care. And apparently, neither did the 10 lepers in today's gospel reading. The story that we read today in our gospel reading is of these 10 lepers who, standing far off from Jesus, call out to Jesus from a distance that they had to stay in because they were contagious in theory. And they said, Jesus, Master, have mercy on us, heal us. But Jesus doesn't heal them right away. Instead, he tells them to go on a journey. Go. Show yourselves to the priests, which means they have to journey to Jerusalem, where the temple is. They have to go on quite a long journey. And it's a strange journey. It's a strange journey because Jesus tells them to set out on this journey while they are still sick. And that is completely backwards. When you had leprosy in Jesus' day, you did not go to the priest in order for the priest to give you some kind of magical incantation or give you some medicine that only they had. They couldn't cure you. Their only purpose was to certify that you were indeed healthy and you could rejoin society. That was the only reason. So you never set off to go to show yourself to the priest while you were sick. And yet that's what Jesus tells them to do. Go right now while you're still sick. And that was backward. But it was also a strange journey because Jesus tells them to set out on this journey when they don't have any idea what that journey is going to have in store for them. I mean, we read the story and it goes, well, you know, as they went along, they were cleansed and they were healed. But they don't know that. Jesus didn't say, start walking down the road, but as you walk down the road, you're going to be healed now. They didn't know. They just had to head out on this journey with this confidence that somehow or other, God was going to do something with them as they were on that journey. But they didn't know what it would entail. And it was a strange journey for Jesus to send them on because finally, in the end, the point of the journey was the journey itself, not the destination. The healing came about through the journey, not reaching the end of the journey. And that's usually what we think about in terms of journeys. Journeys are about the end point. But it wasn't for them. These guys may have thought when they first started out, they may have figured, well, somehow when we get to Jerusalem, maybe the priest will come out and do what Naaman wanted Elisha to do. Wave their hands over the spot and call upon the name of the Lord, and somehow we're going to be magically healed. But the point of the journey was the journey itself. And that's what made it different. And the trust and the willingness to go on that journey, even when they were sick, and even when they didn't know what the journey would entail, that was the faith that Jesus said made them well. We often focus on the thankfulness of the one guy who comes back and praises God and gives thanks to Jesus. And Jesus says that's a great thing. That's important that you've come back and said thank you. But in the end, what Jesus says to him is your faith has made you well. Not your thankfulness, not your return. It's your faith. And faith was not something that they just had in their head or in their hearts. It was their willingness to go on that journey, even though they were still sick, even though they didn't know how the journey would all work out. And sometimes, that's the way faith is for us too. Faith is also a journey. It's not just a thought in our heads or a feeling in our hearts. It's the willingness to go on a journey that Jesus calls us on, which may also mean that we need to start out on a journey of faith, even when we do not have our act entirely together. And that is hard for me, and maybe it's hard for you too, because I do like to always figure out, if I'm going to start something new, whatever that journey is, if it's a physical journey, if it's a new way of doing something, if it's an emotional or spiritual journey, I want to feel like I am strong and confident and I am ready to do it. Sometimes that need to feel like you're all set and ready to go, that can get in the way of being open to the kind of journeys that Jesus calls us to be part of. Sometimes the most important thing for our faith journey is to be willing to say, okay, I'm going to give this a shot, even though I don't feel ready, I don't feel strong, maybe I don't even feel so well. But maybe that's the moment that Jesus is calling us to go on a journey. For us too, the journey of faith is also about accepting that we don't always know what the journey will entail. I hate that too, because I want to know exactly what's going on. I want to have contingency plans, because I've been on journeys and there have been problems, and I want to know that I have backup plans, and backup plans for my backup plans, and I want to have it all together. And, you know, we live in a society in which we are frequently criticized, and other people criticize us for not having thought things through well, which means you didn't figure out what the problems might be and how you would deal with them. And some of you work in jobs where you are punished mercilessly if whatever your project is, you have not figured out what could go wrong and provided for what could go wrong before you even start down the road. And so those kinds of feelings and those attitudes that so often we work with prevent us sometimes from being able to say, you know what? God needs me to kind of move in this direction. Maybe this is where God's calling me to act or to move into, and I don't know how it's all going to work. And I don't know how it's going to be. But I need to start before I've had all my ducks in a row. And sometimes that's the most important thing for us too in a journey of faith. And sometimes for us also, a journey of faith is about realizing that sometimes the point of the journey is the journey itself, not the destination. I love to know what the goal is. I know it. I want to find out when I've reached the destination. I want to be able to measure whether I've achieved the goal and things like that. But sometimes it's in the process of the journey that we learn and we grow. It's in the process of figuring it all out that God gives us the kind of healing that we've been looking for. And sometimes it's simply the willingness to experience the journey that helps us to grow in faith and to grow closer to God and to one another. Sometimes faith is simply a journey of hope and healing in our lives. It's the way we receive God's gift of love in our lives, and it can sometimes only happen when we're willing to set out, when we're not feeling all that well, and when we don't know exactly how the journey is going to end. But speaking of endings, I should tell you the ending of the Aldo story. So Aldo did, in fact, go to Hawaii, and he sat on the beach, and he had a great time. And he managed to make it back to D.C., and he did not die in the process. But he did die about 2-3 months later. And we all went to his funeral, and we gave thanks for the journey of his life. And in the end, that's really what faith is. It's the journey of life. It's the journey that Jesus calls us to be on every day, whether we feel strong or weak. It's a journey that we can't always know all the details about, except that we can know that God is walking with us in that journey. And in the end, it's often in and through that journey that we find the love, the hope, and the healing that we've been looking for all along.